What we're going to do now is we're going to ask our three key panelists, and again that's David Earhart from Castalia, Robert Chambers from the Institute for Development Studies, and Nguyen and Ljung from East Meets West. And we're going to ask each of them to make a 5-minute pithy statement, if you will, on a couple of questions that we've asked them in advance. And these are very, very broad questions. And the two questions are, one, results-based financing for sanitation. Yay or nay, do the costs outweigh the benefits? And I think we have to take that question on kind of almost a figurative level. We're not asking anyone to actually give us a cost-benefit analysis of results-based financing. We don't really have those data yet. But I think in general, we're asking for people's opinions. There are costs, management costs, other types of costs associated with results-based financing. And understanding what we know about those, do those outweigh the benefits or the purported benefits of RBF in WASH, in sanitation? And the second question is, if we are to use RBF, if we want to use RBF, what are the conditions that need to be present in order for RBF to work or work properly? Because it, like many interventions, it will work well some places and in some conditions and perhaps not in others. So we're going to ask our invited speakers to reflect on these two questions, and again, to be very brief, about 5 minutes. And as they're responding, they can also indicate to some degree, what do we really know, and maybe what are some of the areas that we don't know much about, so that we have a sense of where we're feeling certain, where we feel like we understand the situation with RBF, and maybe where some of the unknowns are. So with that, I'd like to introduce again Ming Chau Nguyen, ex East Meets West Foundation, and Ljung from the East Meets West Foundation, which is also known as Thrive Networks. What they're going to be talking about is the Community Hygiene Output-Based Aid. And they have a lovely acronym for that called CHOBA. The CHOBA project has been operating in Vietnam and Cambodia for several years now. It's received financial support from the Gates Foundation and perhaps others, although I think the Gates Foundation is the principal funder. CHOBA is an interesting program. Some of you may have already been exposed to it. It was designed to accelerate the climb up the sanitation ladder, especially in Vietnam, where most people have some form of sanitation already. And in Cambodia, a little bit different focus, where people mostly lacked sanitation, so it was getting people into the first rung of the sanitation ladder. And the project itself had a focus on reaching the poorest 40% of the population. So at this point, let me turn it over to Ming Chau and Per. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I will start. You described the background pretty well. So let me just highlight what CHOBA consists of. We provide consumer rebates to poor households, equivalent to 5 to 10% of the cost. In money terms, 20 to 28 US dollars. We provide conditional cash transfers to communes when they reach certain coverage targets. And all the payments to us and to our partners are fixed amounts per poor household that is build and use a sanitary latrine. And the use is actually very important. And Our M&E data shows that in the 250 communes where we have put our main emphasis, the uptake of sanitation or construction of hygienic latrines by poor households is much, much greater than the continued building of hygienic latrines by richer households. So we are really closing the gap between the poor and the rich. Also, our data shows that the rebates, consumer rebates to the poor households, seems to have a greater impact on the uptake than the conditional cash transfers. And we did that study on 4 different treatment arms, and with the control group, and then we have one group where we have both rebate and conditional cash transfers, and that's where we had the greatest impact. In conclusion, the CHOBA has proven to be very cost-effective. We are achieving our output for poor people at 2/3 of the cost of the National Target Program, and they are reaching primarily rich households, which is the easy stuff. We are also highly leveraged, that for each dollar in consumer rebate and program costs, the households invests $8, which means it's a leverage which is much higher than what I've seen in virtually all other sanitation programs. And now over to Minh Chau.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This is Minh Chau. As Peter mentions, I was the key designer and architect of RBF. Apart from sanitation, we also done RBF in the field of education and water supply. But I'm restricted myself only today to talk about sanitation. And there would be focus on what works and what doesn't work with RBF. So as Per has said and Peter mentioned, we use RBF as a tool in order to achieve objective of the challenges that we face. So in sanitation, we saw that a lot of market-based solutions got what we call the low-hanging fruits, the people who can afford to reach the market, then they would be willing to adopt, accelerate their uptake in terms of hygienic latrine, while the lowest 40% is a lot more difficult. So that's the problem we want to solve, and that's why we use RBF. And secondly, much more in Vietnam than in Cambodia, there's what we call the aspirational latrines. This is due to what we call the consumer preference and study, that they don't want to build a lousy latrine or dig a hole. They wanted to build a proper latrine because this is work toward real estate improvement, even for the poor. So what works with RBF? We, from both all of the 3 RBF operation that we're doing, and particularly in sanitation, the local institutional context is very, very important. And so the choice of our partners in Vietnam and Cambodia is very different. In Vietnam, we use the Women's Union, which is a very grassroots organization, has about 14 million members. And in Cambodia, we work mainly with the Provincial Department of Rural Development. And when we designed the RBF tool, we asked ourselves, this is not really because there is a policy, government policy of non-subsidy of sanitation. So if we use RBF, we have to design in such a way that it is not being conceived as a subsidy program and go against the government policy. So we design it, we do what we call the use of the incentive as a catalytic force to focus people's attention from the central government down to the local government, the bank, the Vietnam Bank of Social Policy, which is the government bank, and our partners on the ground, and particularly the beneficiaries, to focus them to adopt, to accelerate the uptake to do sanitation latrine today. I ought to mention there was some question about behavioral change. We know it's very difficult to do the RBF with behavioral change, but one of the way we structure it is to bring in behavioral change through the latrine program. So next to the toilet, there is a hand washing basin that has to be attached. The cost is very minimum once you started building a kind of a hygienic latrine. And then also on the verification process, when we do this, we also go beyond just use and build latrine. We go into hand washing, we go into collection of waste, and also the use of safe water. And the third area that is very important when people talk about RBF, they focus a lot on subsidy, but in our experience, it is putting demand and supply together, and therefore the pay for result have to be applied to all relevant stakeholders. As somebody mentioned before, some of the comment, if we don't monitor it well, the program will fail. And so because of this, we had to have a very reliable baseline, which is our frustration for not being able to get the good data for us to do, particularly in the case of CCT, that we need that reliable baseline in order to measure the performance of the communities. We also need to have a monitoring system that allows rapid verification, so we use a lot of IT. We develop what we call CHOBA apps that allow us to do this. And definitely we learn through times, and this is the Gates Foundation has been very good to allow us to learn and adjusting. And the last one is because of the contract that we have agreed with Gates, we have to invent over time and become very innovative in terms of our process. What does not work with RBF, definitely for all of you who have worked in this area, is if you have low tolerance for risk, stick with traditional inputs program from the donors if they agree to it. In our case, we do take a lot of financial and reputation risk. Particular for product innovation is not yet proven. It would be very difficult for you to bet your dollars and your reputation and your finance on it. So don't use it to experiment with new products. You have to know your product. You know that you can do it. Thirdly, there's a question of cost inflation here, which is much less on sanitation, but in our water supply, there was a big issues on cost inflation, and therefore the contract has to be adjusted, in this case with the World Bank, the GPOBA. And if you remain non-transparent, don't even venture into this area, because everything is black and white. It has to be very transparent because it's being verified by donors. And lastly, which is what I appeal to all of the donors, use this but not stay rigid, because there's it's not particularly when you scale up, it's not that easy. Thank you.
Okay, understood. All right, well, thank you very much, Ping Chau and Per, for that nice overview of CHOBA and some of the challenges that you faced and techniques that you used to overcome them. I guess we'll take just a few moments now to see if there are any clarifying questions. Yeah, it looks like we are seeing some interest in the monitoring process. Susan Davis has asked us how East Meets West monitors latrines and how do you measure hygienic. Those are very good questions. I think you'll get a good answer on that. Blake is referring to a cost factor, 5 to 10% of cost is in Vietnam, although I'm not sure exactly what that means. I think he was referring to something in the presentation specifically. Francesco has asked, does the project include elements to ensure sustainability in medium to long term of the sanitation infrastructure, which is built by the communities? Susan has asked another question on monitoring hand washing. Well, why don't we start at the top of those questions. Susan Davis has asked us how you monitor latrines. Now, I know that could be a 30-minute response, Minh Chau, but maybe just a brief response on that because monitoring was such an important part of your project. Go ahead.
Yes, the monitoring aspect of it is important, starting with enumerations of households. So we have data on every single household. Secondly, it is being followed up after the construction of latrines and the hand washings on it. And so we verified about 30% of the list that's submitted. Thirdly, we have to really train our partners on the ground to do that kind of work. If they're not there, there's not going to be possible. And now people act as an verificator, and later the verificator from the Gates Foundation come and verify our work also. And on how do we monitor hand washing, we only ask question and observe and get the knowledge. We don't have enough resources to do the kind of study that WSP is doing. Then on sustainability of the infrastructure, yes, we do go back, and actually right now the project is coming to the end, and we are now working on commercializations of this whole process using exactly the same way but in a commercial way in order to ensure sustainability of the program. But the infrastructure that was used in both the superstructure is very, very important also for Vietnam and Cambodia, and because they invest so much on it relative to the underground, it is very difficult for them not just abandon, not to use it so much because they invest so much on the superstructure also. I think I covered most of the question. On Cambodia, it is not the same 5 to 10% of the cost because the cost of latrine is much cheaper there. And we have to provide it the support at some level that would be interesting to people. So the percentage is about 40 to 50%. But in Vietnam, the cost of latrine is so high because of the consumer preference and because of the limited money that we got from Gates Foundation. Our contract is $50 per latrine for a family of 5. And therefore, with the cost of $300, $400 per latrine, the cost of consumer rebate we give is only about 5 to 10%. So I think I covered most of them, right?
Okay, yeah, and I think I see a lot of other questions here which would bear a more detailed response as well, but I think we need to move on.